This is a conditional use permit for a minor exception. Currently, the setback requirement in this particular zoning district is 5 feet. In this case, this is an older constructed residence. I'm thinking it was in the 1950s. It was constructed with a 2-foot setback, which was somewhat common back in that era, especially in this neighborhood. And the proposal is to extend that same 2-foot setback. Otherwise, if it were constructed with a 5-foot setback, it would require only a building permit and not a conditional use permit, and we would not be here today. In this particular case, the conditional use permit requires a notification that goes out to the neighbors. The neighbors are those properties located within 300 feet of the subject site. That notice went out mid-December on the 16th. A few days later, 5 days later, a letter was received from one of the neighbors indicating a protest. In that case, due to the letter received, the project cannot be considered administratively, therefore it went to Planning Commission. There were a number of emails sent from the protester. Neighborhood concerns, their concerns are with backyard views, and they request that the setback be 5 feet instead of the 2-foot requested. And what would happen with this particular project is this garage would go back 11 more feet. So this view would be the same, but 11 more feet of garage. That is basically the project at hand. In terms of analysis, this zoning district is low-density residential. It provides for single-family homes. It's an infill site. The general plan requires that development be compact. This would aid to that as it is an existing infill project. It's consistent with the land use policy 2.4. The extension of 2 feet is a provision in the zoning code through minor exception that has been implemented many times in the past, probably several times per year. It is not often that they are protested and getting to a planning commission or a council hearing, but there are times when that occurs, and this is one of them. The colors and the materials of the addition would match the existing garage. The height is 14 foot 3 inches. It's 9 inches under the maximum 15. It conforms with the interior garage dimensions of 20 by 20. It's an accessory structure that matches and complies with the maximum accessory structure size requirements, which is 10% of the lot area. This project was originally considered, or rather scheduled, for Planning Commission on January 4. There was a flaw in the public notice. It was continued to January 18th. The applicant could not make that meeting, so on January 5th, the applicant asked that the project be rescheduled. It required an extension to what we call the Permit Streamlining Act. That was provided. It was scheduled for February 1. At the February 1 meeting, we had an issue with a quorum. A couple of planning commissioners were not there. Another one had a conflict. Therefore, we did not have enough planning commissioners to act on the project. Therefore, it is forwarded to City Council for final action. That's why we're here. It's exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act per section 15303. As mentioned before, it complies with the general plan and the zoning code through this minor exception process. The staff recommendation is to approve the conditional use permit. Findings are set forth in the resolution, and that is the public notice. It was posted on the 10th. It was mailed out to the property owners on the 6th, and it was published in the newspaper on the 9th.
Yeah, at our Housing and Land Use Committee, there was some direction from the committee to reach out to the protesters, of this plan. Did that happen? Was there an attempt to mediate some of their concerns?
I was not in any of those mediation meetings if they did occur. I'm not sure if they occurred or not.
And just to add, I think the challenge is that with the 2 foot, there's not a lot of options because you can't, if you put vines on it, it could damage the siding. A tree or other means to provide that, because we did discuss it after the meeting, are problematic. You couldn't fit a tree there because the space is too small. So I think there's not a lot of options to really mitigate that, other than pushing it back to the 5 feet, which then wouldn't require a conditional use permit at all.
Yeah, no, I understand that there may be limited options, but the consensus from the committee was that we asked staff to reach out to them to see if, some creative solution or at least a discussion could be had. So it doesn't appear that that's occurred. That's very concerning because I believe that was the consensus of that committee. Is that correct, Councilmember Rocha? Sorry. Oh, my apologies, yes.
Yeah, point of information, the committee did, in its motion, ask that mitigation efforts would be identified as part of that. And so just wanted to put that out there. That was a request to the committee, and I am disappointed that didn't happen, but I do understand the limitations there.
In this sort of situation, is it really feasible to go a few feet back? Or, I mean, what sort of options have been explored, or any?
Well, the options are that the location of the addition could be shifted over, but the zoning code provides for this process. The applicant went through the process, and this is where we are with it.
Right.
As mentioned before, oftentimes the neighbors don't have the concerns that we're seeing in this particular case. This is very unique. I've not seen one that comes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Understood. And the applicant is not willing to move the structure over 3 feet?
We have not asked the applicant to do so. This is a
Okay.
process that is afforded to the applicant through the zoning code.
I see.
The staff is not in the position of talking applicants out of submitting applications.
Right, I understand. Yeah.
Just to add, sorry, Courtney, if they went 3 more feet, they could do it by right.
Right,
They
yeah, I
wouldn't
understand.
even be
They wouldn't be
here
here, yeah.
in a conditional use permit. But because they're following an existing wall line, which
yep.
is non-conforming at 2 feet,
Yep.
that's why they
That's why
are
we're
going
here.
for the conditional use permit.
Refresh my memory, to get here is a non-refundable $5,000 charge, right? To go through the CUP process, isn't there a fee involved?
It's a two-step fee process. It's cheaper if it's handled administratively. Obviously, that train has left the station. We're in the expensive
So what's the
portion.
cost to this train?
Off the top of my head, I think you're about correct, $5,000 or $6,000 so
Okay.
far.
And that's not refundable, right?
Correct. We've spent that money. We've noticed this project multiple times. Plus, there's cost from the applicant side on
Understood.
drawings.
That's all, thanks.
Have we done an estimation as to expected costs? Should there be, I understand that there is a wall line, but should there be that 3 feet shift? Has there been a cost comparison of what the expected outcome would look like?
Staff normally doesn't ask for those types of analysis. However, there is a way to redesign the project with an offset. There would be an extra wall, there would be more connections, there'd be a roof line change. I'm sure that could be quantified, perhaps the applicant.
Though the applicant at their expense, and I'm not sure what that would be, would have to significantly redesign and prepare drawings. And there would be building considerations and extra building costs because you'd have to redesign the roofing as well.
I would direct the council to the findings, and in order for an approval of something like this, there are 3 findings, or actually 4 findings that need to be established. The first one is the environmental review. It's exempt, so that finding is fairly straightforward. The other findings deal with a more judgment call in terms of whether the project would result in a detrimental condition to the community, to the neighborhood. The staff recommended approval. From the streetscape, from the public side, this project, no one would see it, so it meets those standards from a public consideration. But from a proximity to a neighbor condition, that is more at the judgment call, and that's where the findings, I think, become important. One side might indicate that it's detrimental to their views and their garden, whereas the other, might have different ambitions. Maximizing space in their backyard, maximizing the size of the interior space of the garage without an offset.
while it's uncommon to get here, we do these a couple of times a year, and we commonly approve them. So what the applicant is asking is not outside of the norm of what we've approved in other situations. So when we're, from a planning perspective, we're looking at what we do, what kind of precedent is out there. And as Courtney said, we base our recommendation on the findings that are in the code. And we felt we are recommending approval because we felt that the findings could be made.
Typically, setbacks are required for a couple of reasons. It's to provide light and ventilation to the neighboring properties. Height has a function of perhaps blocking sunlight. I didn't analyze the shadowing effect that might occur with this particular item. That can be a consideration. Light, ventilation, privacy. It actually provides more privacy from one standpoint, because it would be a longer extension of a boundary between the neighbors. But those are probably the key items or the findings. And the majority of these applications don't even go to Planning Commission. The notifications go out, the neighborhood receives the notifications, and typically a protest is not received. So having the protest is a little bit unique. Going to the Planning Commission would go along with that, and then obviously at the council level, because of the glitches we had with the Planning Commission, that added to the.
I'm prepared. This is Mark Norris. I'm the building designer and permit expediter. Mayor, council, and staff, thank you for the presentation, Courtney. We didn't expect to have any objection. I've done half a dozen of these in my 40-year career here. Never had a neighbor object until this time. So we went ahead with our most efficient design of utilizing that space, enclosing that space for storage. It's not in addition to the garage as car parking space. It'll have a door between the two, and it'll be just storage space for the homeowners, as opposed to storing things outside. They can be under the weather and following the same profile as the building. The neighbors do have vegetation extensively on their side that screens a whole bunch of the addition we're planning. So I'm really surprised to hear a complaint about viewscape. Of course, they're not required to keep that landscaping. They could take it down anytime they want to.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your service to all the city council members, to city manager, to the city attorney, and most of all to staff for putting up with me. My name is Rose Clark. After these past 2 months, and by the way, I have to interrupt myself. Thank you, Tony, for bringing up the quality of life. As you grow older, that means a lot, trust me. So after these past 2 months, all of you are familiar with our opposition to our neighbors' request for a conditional use permit, permitting them to build 2 feet away from our fence. The bottom line, I am pleading with you today to help me retain the beautiful sense of enjoyment my family gets when in the backyard we have called home for over 20 years. If the neighbor is allowed to go forth with his request of a minor exemption to extend his garage, I will be viewing a warehouse-type roof line 2 feet from my fence, extending all along the side of my backyard, from my breakfast nook, my bedroom, and most of all, for the park-like area with waterfall and walkways that my 2.5-year-old grandson enjoys playing in. As a realtor for the past 25 years, I'm always preaching about the importance of location. This is the location my husband and I chose years ago to make it our paradise. As we have grown older, it has become more of a retreat and one where we enjoy spending the time we have. We're not opposed to them adding to their garage. We just want it a little further away from our fence line. I believe the new construction is 5 feet setback, but under the old law, permits like these are granted. Please reconsider changing the old law, if necessary, to help people like us enjoy the homes that we so cherish and worked on. As a side note, I'm the same realtor who brought them next door to me and sold them the house. but never in my wildest dreams did I imagine I would be fighting for our view, our health, and the tranquility of our home site. All of you, especially staff, have much more experience in matters like this than I have. I ask you to please think out of the box to benefit both parties.
The problem we have is that when this, if you agree that they can continue the wall 12 more feet, there is a state law that says as soon as that construction is done, that can immediately be turned into an ADU. I would have an ADU 2 feet from my property line that is 11 feet long and whatever feet down into their property, 20 feet. Now I'm asking, if it was your backyard, would you want an ADU 2 feet from your property line?
Thank you.
Arguments. My name is Greg Hammer. I am hopefully maybe one of the future owners of this property. And one of the impact on the view shed will be, having this large structure on the side of the house, where right now we can see the garden, but then this would be overpowering, look. Overall, my son he's the grandson. He spends an awful lot of time back there. I know the grandparents spend a lot of time back there. They have, breakfast or lunch, whatever out there. And it's just a really nice, tranquil place. And then having it broken up by such a large structure would be a shame. And so whatever you guys decide, obviously that's what's going to happen, but we do appreciate all your consideration.
Yeah, first,
Thank you very much.
I am disappointed that the residents were reached out to. I understand that maybe that's not staff's role to particularly try to, mediate between two neighbors, but it was, our understanding. I understand the applicant's desire, it's his property. I understand that, and I understand, the opposition to it, quality of life. So it's unfortunate we're here, and it sounds like Councilmember McShane probably had some ideas on how to mitigate some views or landscaping. I wish, I hope that discussion moves forward, not necessarily with McShane, but between neighbors.
This is allowed per our codes, and there was a process that went into it. And just for everyone's knowledge, this was a ministerial act, which meant it was staff alone that could have approved this, but the protest resulted in it becoming a quasi-judicial process, which is why it ended up at this council. But this is typically something that is well within the authority of staff to determine. It's my understanding that there's specific findings that went behind approval of this CUP. And my concern with voting against it would be that we would have to make findings to support the denial of the CUP. And if you cannot make findings that are based in zoning code, it's going to be difficult to uphold that should it be challenged. And so I would like to see more discussions amongst neighbors, but also I recognize this is within the right of the property owner. And that is a challenge that is presented because if you have all the legal right to move forward in this, I am conflicted with asking for them to go above and beyond when it's well within their right. But those are my thoughts.
Also got to visit with realtors last week at Digital Nest. We had probably 60 people in the room. It was sponsored by the Monterey County Association of Realtors, and it was just good. I think there's more transactions that happen in the Salinas Valley, but there's more dollar value that comes from the Monterey Peninsula. And this is a real spectacular thing. I think this is the third meeting that people that do title work and real estate transactions and mortgages were all kind of in the same room, and they're loving our city.
Councilmember McShane.
Yeah, I wish I had a magic wand. I have a technical follow-up question for Courtney, if you would allow that, Mayor. It would determine my motion.
Okay.
Thank you. So, Courtney, if we deny this, are they out the 5,000? Are they unable to build it? I guess, my interest is to allow them to proceed as the neighbor would prefer, and that is with the 5-foot setback. So is there a way that we can, or that I could make a motion to approve it with the 5-foot setback so that they can then proceed and not be out the money they've outlaid so far?
So to be clear, the 5-foot setback, they can do with just a building permit. It wouldn't even require a conditional use permit, but they would be having to spend the money to redesign the whole project, because now they would have to, the reason why they're asking for the 2-yard setback is they're trying to follow the wall that exists on the garage. Now they would have to offset that, which would have, maybe the architect could give an estimate, but they would have to redesign it because you're not depending on that same wall or the existing roof line for support.
Understood. So thank you. That's it.
Okay.
So I'll get to my council comments now.
Okay, thank you.
No further
Yep.
questions. I'll just say that it's unfortunate that we're here. This is too bad. You've got two neighbors live right next door to each other. They've probably exchanged Christmas cookies once or twice. And, this has come down to a call of this body. I mean, it really has. And to Councilmember Rocha's point, are we in a position to determine or legally determine that this is to the detriment of the community and the neighborhood? That's subjective. Could we be called on the carpet and be sued? As far as I know, having been a planning commissioner and sat here for 12 years, I don't think so. I think it's up to us to make that call. To the points made by other colleagues, gosh, I really wish that the two neighbors would have sat down and worked it out. But sometimes that just doesn't happen. It doesn't present itself. And I definitely would side with the idea that it isn't staff's role to do that. I mean, sure, I don't know how you invite a friendly permit expediter who appears to be caught off guard or was caught off guard by this. I've seen Mr. Norris's work. He's got decades of respected work in this realm. Based on what I know of the neighborhood, based on what I know of the situation, I would move to deny what's before us. It's not an easy decision to make, but that's my motion.
Is there a second? Okay. No second, so motion is not valid.
It's good. All things good. And hey, to our team that's left here, thank you. Thank you to our city manager, to our city attorney. We're not all up here to just, bark out some new idea that you you may or may not agree with. We're up here to just represent the city and the good that we're doing, whether it's a filled pothole or a cat that's found. So we're at your service.
I agree. This is a quality of life issue. But I also recognize that legally, you are able to go ahead and continue with this project. This is going to.
There's no doubt this is a difficult one. But as neighbors, and I think this vote this evening has nothing to do with politics. Like Mr. Clark said, I'm going to view it as if it was in my neighborhood. Chances are I won't like it for quality of life purposes. But then on the other hand, if my neighbor went through all the legal channels to get this done, I don't think I'm able to stop this person. I think what's going to happen here is you're both going to experience certain issues as you live next door to each other. But I will vote on, like if it was my neighbor. Because, going back to Mr. Clark's question about would you like it if it was in next door to you? Well, next door to me, I have the same property line. My garage is the wall, is the fence to my neighbor. But we work along, we get along well. As a matter of fact, my neighbor is building an ADU right now. So, but he's gone through, I don't like some of the stuff that's being done, but he's gone through the legal channels. So this evening, I'm going to make a motion to support.
Second.
To approve a resolution supporting staff. And again, hope things work out. Thank you.
I would like to thank staff for me, at least at the Housing and Land Use Committee meeting, there was times where I had to really slow it down because I don't do this as a profession. You guys are the professionals. And thankfully for me and the council members up here, we have folks like you that are professionals that go out there and do the work and give us the best recommendation.
Sure.
I just want the city attorney to clarify something because it was referenced that this would not be subject to legal challenge if we denied it. And I think it's important for the protester to know that we're going to do it. We tried to do everything we could. And so I want the city attorney to comment on what the legal ramifications would be in the event that we would deny a CUP and could not make substantial findings.
So Mayor and Council, if the City Council were to deny this application without making the findings as required under the code, you would expose the city to challenge. That decision needs to be made on the specific 4 findings that Mr. Grossman articulated in his presentation, and without those, you are vulnerable to legal challenge, but through a writ of mandate.
You know, I've said often that all decisions in local government are made on either data or emotion. And the data here shows that this proposal follows all the zoning codes. It's consistent with land use policy. It meets all the standards. I would say from staff's perspective, as you bring it forward, this is certainly one of those elements of like textbook case, so to speak. The emotion side of it is you have neighbors who are upset over quality of life, who are upset over lack of communication with each other. And so I would encourage the neighbors after this decision is made to really reach out and be proactive. You are still neighbors, and recognize that challenge, whichever this decision may go, can make for long-standing wedges between neighbors. I would tell this council too, I think it's interesting, you know, the expansion of a structure in a backyard, as we are overwhelmingly encouraging staff to approve ADUs, to approve additional housing. This is built for storage, not for additional people. So interestingly, you know, it would seem like it would be a slam dunk in the context of like you're just building onto a garage. But I recognize the beauty of a backyard. I recognize the serenity of one. And so from my end of things, recognizing that there is an emotional element of it, I have to look at the data and support staff's recommendation. So with that, we'll go ahead and call for the vote.
Motion made by Councilmember Barrera, second by Councilmember Osornio to approve CUP 2022-057. Councilmember Barrera?
Yes.
Councilmember Gonzalez?
Yes.
Councilmember McShane?
Yeah.
Councilmember Osornio?
Yes.
Councilmember Rocha?
Yes.
Councilmember Sandoval?
Yes.
Mayor Craig?
Yes.
Motion passes.